Most of our problems, one way or another, are originating by the fact that we are being squeezed economically. When my father was building petrochemical plants to make polyethylene in the 1950s and 60s, he didn't have to worry about the government. There were some regulations, but they were sensible. His job was to build a chemical plant that worked well, the best he could. You couldn't even build those plants today. Not possible. You can go down to the grocery store and use polyethylene. You probably get some out of a plant that he helped build. But you could not construct a plant to build that plant today. And the reason is that the gradual encroachment of taxation, regulation, and government-sponsored litigation has simply made it almost impossible for industry to function in this country. And it's driven our industry abroad. They've taxed away our capital. They have regulated our companies so badly they spend what remains of their money meeting regulations. And if they get through all that, there's this legal threat hanging over them, which may put them out of business anyway. If you take a train ride from here to New York City, you'll pass Gary, Indiana. Mile after mile after mile after mile of rusting steel mills. All gone. They taxed away their capital and destroyed them. We buy our steel from Korea. There is only one plant in the entire United States that can make iron ore into steel. The industry is gone. And that has happened over and over and over to our industries. And we don't have to talk about large industries. You guys know the story on small industries or small businesses. Each region has its own problems. In Oregon, our lumber industry, they have, first, the government has wrecked our economy, so their product sells for a low price. But the government has also come in and regulated the supplies of their logs. By shrinking the supply of logs, they've driven the price of logs up. So their raw material costs a lot, and their product sells for a low price. And in Southern Oregon, there's only one lumber mill that is still making money. The rest are all bankrupt. But the problems are similar throughout the country. This squeezing of us, the taking away of our freedom. In the 50s and 60s, America was an incredible juggernaut. Reading my weekly reader as a little kid, you could be proud. The United States made 3/4 of the world's steel, half of its concrete, grew most of its food. It went on and on. And that wasn't because the American people were genetically superior. It was because they were free. And the biggest problem Europe had was what they called the brain drain. This was the exit of productive people from Europe into the United States, because all of the people from all over the world wanted to come to the United States where they were free to produce. And the result was the incredible technological miracle, the greatest event of its kind in history. The United States grew as a tremendous juggernaut, industrially and other things. Our science flourished, men went to the moon, and they were on their way to Mars. But what happened to us then was gradually the career politicians started to squeeze us, putting on taxes, putting on regulations. All of you have lived through this, or your parents have lived through it. We gradually adapted. Each of us learned to live. We learned to scramble around and work our way between the tentacles of government and still get our job done. But our productivity kept going down. The great economist Julian Simon spent his life proving a particular point about economics. That point was that people, whether they're in primitive societies or advanced societies, always produce more than they consume, if they are free to do so. And the American people were the tremendous example of that. But if the freedom is contracted too much, they can't. And now the government is on the back of the American worker, on the back of American industry, and on the back of American business to such an extent that we can't produce more than we consume. We consume more than we produce. So our problems, they point to other things. Like we just had this terrible economic, all caused by mortgages, right? All caused by mortgages. Well, gee, when my parents started out, my dad was a beginning engineer in the Depression, so they had to rent for about 6 years before they could buy a house. My mother was frugal. They bought the house. There wasn't any debt. They bought the house. And say that to a young person today. Say, you shouldn't have a debt on your house. That's great. The man goes home, says to his wife, honey, I think we ought to save until we have enough money to buy this house. And she will say, well, after the taxes and all this other stuff, we'll buy a house in 30 years. It'd be kind of nice to have a nice house to raise the children in. This has been caused by the squeezing of our people, taxing away our resources. So this needs to be fixed. And there is only one way to solve our economic problems. There's just only one to get our freedom back. There isn't any other. It won't come out of a bailout. This is senseless. A bailout. The government can only spend the money it takes from us. So they take money from the private sector and spend it in the public sector. They waste a little along the way, and they also pay public employees on average 45% more than we can pay in private industry. But it's like taking water out of a swimming pool. You got a swimming pool here, you bail some out of one end, carry it down to the other end, maybe spill a little, that's the government waste, pour it in the pool, and presto, the level didn't go up. The money they're taking for the bailouts, of course, is either taken from us immediately or taken from us later. That doesn't work. The only thing that works is to restore freedom to Americans and allow them to be what they can really be.